I decided to innovate the podcast and put together something kind of different but familiar because my brother-in-law, who's kind of like my big brother, the person I look up to most in the world, he called me up. He doesn't really call me a lot like that because he's very busy and he got two kids. And he's a single dad because my sister passed away, so he's widowed. But he hit me up like, yo, I'm following you, what you're doing with your Substack, you're doing your thing. The artist fly, you're fly, you're doing your thing. I always believed in you, kid. That's really positive energy. But he was like, I feel like you need to like just more unfiltered. You just got to give them more and more unfiltered. You're giving them too only through the art and the artifice. You're not ever like just giving them unfiltered Andrew Robert Cologne. You got to give them that arc. And I was like, I don't really argue with Big Bro. I was like, thank you for calling me. Thank you for thinking about me. Thank you for taking that step to reach out to me and give me constructive, feedback. So I was like, yo, I need to do a podcast because then I can just really just do my thing and just do a little talking and not make it something where it's a lot of work. And it's a whole other thing how I stumbled into this structure for the podcast. I think that's some real art shit because it's real form and content, how I came to this structure. But, it was really because of my big bro, Chris Omotessa, that I ended up just being open to doing the podcast in general. He called me. And, I'm supposed to get a question, to myself. So if I was to ask myself a question, I'm in the moment right now. I didn't even have an idea of like what the question would be. And, here I am. So what question should I ask myself? What is it about fiction that made you leave it, and when you're coming back to it, what's the feeling of it? And the reason I say that is I wrote fiction. I've kind of always been like a creator. Like I was making like films in high school, and when I went to college and I really got into fiction, and I was really into fiction for a long time, and only really into fiction until I was like 27, and then I kind of left fiction completely, and I didn't really return back until last year to writing fiction. So that was, from 27 to now, and I'm still 27. So lots of years have passed, but I'm still 27. But yeah, that reason I think is that, it makes me think of some of the other questions and answers and all that, because I've heard all the answers from everybody else. And I think, fiction is the most vulnerable. Writing fiction, the vulnerability is crazy. And the deeper you get into it, the deeper you understand what that even means. It's like when you're writing fiction, you giving of yourself in a way that like, you don't even know what you're putting out there. You could read it 20 years later yourself and realize what you were telling the world was not even something you were totally aware of when you wrote it 20 years prior. And so that means that years after you go, that could be true if you get it published and it remains relevant, that people could read it and they will know you in ways that only time and technology and advancement would even give the person the opportunity to understand you, so they'll know you better than you potentially. So at least in some way. So the vulnerability is crazy when it comes to fiction writing. You leave it on the page. Very naked sport, fiction writing. And yeah, I think coming back to it, I think I have more stability in my life and more confidence in who I was so that I could manage the level of vulnerability that writing required of me. And I have a really strong idea of what the purpose behind making myself so vulnerable in my writing is. And I'm try to be more intentional about like what is the messages that are subconsciously happening in my writing, and also humble enough to know that and accept that there are messages in it that I don't even know, and that's part of the magic of it.
Substack is sort of like the best thing that's ever happened to me. I I am having such an incredible time. I've met some of the most amazing and intelligent people that I've ever met in my life. And that's a lot. There's a lot that says a lot. I have an incredibly rich artistic community around me in my where I live. And I'm completely blown away by the people that I'm meeting. And I love so much about Substack. I love that there's readers. I love that I'm not alone anymore. Writing is quite solitary and it doesn't feel like it anymore. And it has got me so inspired. I've written more in the last 4 months than I've written in the last 10 years. That said, I am not making a lot of visual art. It's entirely changed my focus. I usually do one really big art project a year, and I am not doing one now. The writing has become everything. And I think a lot of that is about there being people and this community and the idea that I could actually make money off of this someday eventually. It's not the money that's important, it's the supporting the work, the idea that maybe I could just do this. Yeah, start over again. Yeah, this is going to be hard for me to say. Yeah, let me start over. Even in art school, I was doing fiber arts and textiles. I was doing printmaking. I was doing video work. Just, I can't seem to stay in one medium. And part of that, I think, this is a big question. One reason that I don't stay in one lane creatively, I think, has a lot to do with not wanting to get bogged down in the technicalities. Something that I say whenever I'm trying to get some kind of art grant is that I say that I like staying kind of naive and discovering rather than being an expert in something, because that expert perfection kind of blocks me from my own wild creativity. And I often write that each project has its own media designed from the concept. I would not consider myself a conceptual artist because that's a whole very specific world. But I do start from the idea, and the idea is what's important. So maybe the idea will demand an animated video, or the idea will demand paint or drawing, or live interactive video, or performance with a dancer, or performance with an actor. But writing is a whole different world, because I do tend to find that the technicality, the really high quality writing, is in itself the vehicle for everything. And everything can become writing in a way that in visual art, I need a different tool to make it. So in some ways, writing includes all of the rest of it for me. And the fact that I spend so much of my life working with visual work makes it so that my writing is incredibly visual, or at least is visually oriented. I honestly think that in some ways my years and years as a visual artist has been me avoiding writing. I stopped writing for a long time when I was like 25 and turned to visual work, because I got so critical of myself. I couldn't write down a single sentence without comparing myself to these amazing career writers. And maybe all these years of making visual art has gotten me very loose creatively, where allow myself to go a little wild and see what comes out, and then use my available skills to hone it, to get it to be what it wants to be each piece of writing, without having my head full of all of this ambition or something like that. And maybe I've learned how to be where I am, to be at the skill level that I'm at, and trying to push myself forward, but not trying to be ambitious. When I was 25, I was trying to be Dostoevsky, at the beginning of my writing work. And now I've learned how to just be where I am and do what I can do and try and make it better every time and try and serve the project itself. And also probably learned a lot how to put my ego aside. I definitely think in English, although I do mumble to myself in French. I hear myself doing it, so I must be thinking in French sometimes. The conversations that I have with people in my head probably happen in French. I prepare my thoughts in French more than I probably do in English. But the main way that it's affected my writing is that I am so hungry for English that I think it gives me kind of a manic desire to compose things in English. It gives me this extra fire because since so much of my life is in French. And it's like, it reminds me of last winter. I went home for Christmas, home to America for Christmas, and had this party with one of my friends. And we decided to pull out the karaoke mic and to be singing. And I just like grabbed the mic, and it's now become this sort of famously mocked event where I just could not get off the mic. I turned into the MC for the night and had this whole personality, and I was just on fire. I just couldn't stop talking, and I couldn't stop creating this narrative. And I was just, yeah, it was completely out of control. I lost control of my ability to let go of the mic. It was funny. It was also super annoying. And I think that night came out of this desperate hunger for the English language. The question is, what is one myth about the life of an artist you would like to see dispelled? For me, I guess there's this idea about the artist serving themselves and this idea that because you need to do it, that makes it selfish. It's taken me a long time to realize that I am offering something to the world by making, that I feel like we as artists are the mirror. We are listening to the subconscious. We are here to be more alive, to have our senses opened, and to do that opening. I really do feel like it's incredibly important, like almost like I don't want to say spiritual because I don't like that word, but like on a deep level, we've got to be here. We got to be doing what we're doing, and I think we should be paid for that. I think we should be able to live. I think it's important work. And I think that that's something that I've really struggled with this. I had, in my marriage, it was something incredibly destructive. Was like, I was just off mucking about, pleasing myself. And my ex-husband was doing the real work and bringing the real money in. And while that was totally true, I like it took me a long time to realize it's real work and it's important. It's just because I'm not building highways or, creating laws or something doesn't mean that it's important, that it's not important. My dad's always reminding me that writing is work, and I love that. And I would love it to be my main gig. I think to be an artist, you need a little bit of narcissism, and I'm definitely narcissistic. But one of the things, I really enjoy myself. Like, I really enjoy my imagination. I enjoy my mind, but I also really, really enjoy other people. I'm super influenced by other people's thoughts. I got people in my head all the time, and I love it when people can describe something better than me, and I love it when someone makes something outside of myself. I love collaborating. I've had such a great time collaborating with people. And so I'm like a narcissistic person who's really, really good at listening to and really receptive towards others. So, and that seems like a really important balance to me. And I don't know if I wouldn't want that to ever go away if I started, like, I think I'm an incredible person, but like, I'm just another incredible person among all sorts of other incredible people. And I would never want to start thinking like of myself as being more incredible than other people. I think that's destructive. I don't really hunger for fame. For me, success would be amazing because if it could fuel what I'm doing, if it could make my life easier, if it could get me the supplies that I need, I love on Substack having readers in a way. It has inspired me more than I ever realized that it would to have readers. And but since I feel like ego can be a really negative force, especially in terms of creativity, I I see compliments give me fuel. I see that. But and fame would be awesome and money would be awesome. It would be great to have to stop doing all of my other jobs and just do this as my job. But yeah, it's not the thing that fuels me. Ego is not the thing that fuels me, and fame is not the thing that fuels me. It's the work that fuels me. And the fact that the work is going towards someone, that it's being read, that it's being understood, that makes me want to get in even better. So I just watched Chair Wax Whack World. It's 15 minutes of these different music videos that transition perfectly from one to the next. They are wildly imaginative. They are so vivid, so unleashed into pure imagination, but also it's not n'importe quoi, which is like, sometimes I think people looking at artists from a distance think like they're just doing whatever, like they're just sticking a banana on a wall with some duct tape and then calling it art, that kind of misunderstanding of the elitism of art. What for me, what I see when I watch something like this is it's not the whatever, just throwing stuff together. This is a deep dig into the imaginative world. And I guess for me, what we're talking about when we get to art is when you don't have roads already dug in, you don't have structures to fall back on, and you're just digging deep into your unconscious, pulling it out, and then really honing it. And I think that's what's so great about these videos. There's they're just they're each one is its own universe with its own aesthetic, with its own props, with its own scenography, the costumes, the makeup. She herself is transforming herself almost unrecognizably from one video to the next. I love the beginning with using her in the nail salon, using the nails to illustrate each different parts of the lyrics, and then moving into this pet salon, and then there's an after party, there's a playroom, and each world is brightly colored, saturated colors. There's this feeling of going back to childhood. There's this Sesame Street kind of feeling to it. Yeah, there's like sock puppets in one of them where she's talking about the dog that she misses. She's playing with lots of different genres in terms of music. Her voice is so different, and her phrasing is so different. And so for me, what's really interesting about this is that it's the deep dig. It's the pure creativity. And as a teacher, as an art teacher and a writing teacher, what I try and do is get kids into the space, finding what works for each individual to get into the space of clearing away all the noise to get to listen to yourself and do that deep, deep digging into your own imagination. And these videos are such a perfect explanation of or illustration of someone who's done the deep dig and then able to pull out and hone the imagery that they find in her own work. It's incredible. Everybody needs to go out and watch it, like right now.
I kind of have a paradoxical relationship to fame because most of my life I really would not have. identified myself as someone who was seeking fame in my name. I do think I wanted to be known as really good at something, but I also think I have a weird thing with knowing that I can be very disagreeable, very shy, and very vulnerable. Because of that, it's also cautious around fame and almost desire to be hidden and to be mysterious. So, but then I also really desire attention. So I guess I've had that dynamic for a long time, and as I've become an adult, I've been able to better articulate that paradox to myself as part of my existence. But I think that before I kind of get into what I would do with fame, I guess, if I was to achieve it, I guess the effort to be famous, it's kind of cringe to admit you want to be famous. Even famous people say, "Oh, I wish I wasn't famous. I just want the money without the fame." But it's like, you're a rapper. There's no way that you would have the money without being famous. The fame is how you're selling your raps. I mean, fame is just marketing, right? It's just a tool for marketing. So, and what I was trying to do before I got into Substack was work with authors to get their books made into movies, while trying to optioning some books, trying to pitch, getting into some labs, making some progress, working with someone else who had made a very successful indie debut film for some directors as a producer. I realized that it really, fame was the thing that got a project to move quickly for me to ultimately fulfill my other goal, which is to help lots of people get their films made and their TV shows made in a faster, lucrative, and more confident way as an investment. I needed to actually have an audience and an ability to generate attention on my own.
For those of you who don't know, my name is Peter Schull. I'm a novelist, a short story writer, an occasional poet, and an essayist, and I also teach high school English at a large public high school in Kansas. What is the most exhausting part of being a teacher? This is a tough one. My impulse is to say decision fatigue. I think teachers have a lot of students, they have a lot of decisions they have to make every day. We're constantly evaluating situations and deciding what's best to do in each situation. Compounding this, we have grading fatigue, and grading is really what gets me down. The decision fatigue in the classroom at least has, on the positive end, the immediate positive feedback result you see from your students. You can tell that the work you're doing is paying off. And when you're grading, you're kind of in the salt mines. There's the feeling that you could be doing a lot of work and the kid is going to look at the paper, check the grade at the top, and throw it away. There's a great teacher named Kelly Gallagher. He's very influential among educators. He's argued that teachers should assign more work than they could possibly grade in the course of a year. I think by a factor of 4, perhaps, under the logic that students are better off doing work than receiving grades for doing the work, because the practice is really what counts. And I've subscribed to that notion, but then you just have the mental weight of knowing that you just have so much ungraded work of the students, and there's that feeling that you owe them that debt, and it's mentally and it's psychologically exhausting. What do I think about the disagreement that you have, Andrew, with Brock and Anthony Marigold about saline? I have to tell you, I don't know anything about saline. I haven't studied saline. I haven't picked up and read any of saline. As the question moves down, it says, "Where do I stand? Is there a line an artist can cross that warrants a negative association with their work, if not a cancellation? And should current mores be applied to art?" I think that I tend to be closer to being a give artists leeway type of person. A anything in the name of art should be allowed, and I think that I might be close to being not a free speech absolutist, but pretty close to that. So with regard to saline, Obviously, we're social creatures and we have a lot of trouble separating the artist from the art. And I think this works both ways. I think that sometimes we just like people and then we think that their art is better than it really is. And I think sometimes some artists, and I'm going to speak specifically about novelists and short story writers, maybe just novelists, sometimes we really like some novelists' work and then they produce something that's lesser. And we, because we're so inclined, only look at the good parts of it. I think that since we have art critics and institutions that purport to be accurate evaluators of the quality of art because of their experience, these entities ought to be able to separate the artist from the art. And ideally, a lot of regular day consumers of art ought to be able to do the same. What do I think of the state of the publishing industry, and what would I do if I could change it? I think it's too homogenous. I think all the big houses are all in New York City. I think they're all monopolies. The little houses aren't allowed to compete with one another. The mid-list has disappeared. There's entirely too much networking required to get published. The industry seems ideologically homogenous, and there's tremendous pressure to not offend the kinds of people who are running the industry. There's too much emphasis on the comp title. The idea that in order to sell, a book has to look like one of the books that sold big, or better yet, two or three of the books that sold big in the last 5 years. And that discourages audacious, norm-challenging fiction. And I think people on the left enjoyed norm-challenging fiction when it seemed like the right was in control of all the norms in our culture. But now, frankly, it seems like the left is in control of all the norms in our culture. And I think people should challenge that. And you can't do so in the current industry. When the industry is as homogenous as it is now, and there's so much pressure to conform to left-leaning ideology in order to be published, I think it's the responsibility of someone who thinks they are a true artist to go around the industry and publish the work they want to do without getting the benediction of the industry. If I could be married to any writer in history, who would it be? Well, the obvious answer is Jane Austen. Jane Austen is a genius. Her plots, her characters, her prose, the dialogue, on every level, Jane Austen just hammers it. But of course, it would be an enormous disservice to marry Jane Austen. The wisest thing she ever did was to accept a proposal of marriage and then turn around the next day after thinking about it and say no. And she married herself to her art. And I admire her for that tremendously. She died relatively young, but her 6 novels stand as massive monuments. They were tremendous works. Even the slightest of them is so much better than the majority of the novels that gets published today. And so I wouldn't marry Jane Austen, but I would love to get together with her for a coffee date or two, like maybe have a romance. Maybe we could see each other once or twice a year or write letters or something. I love Jane Austen. Obviously, I love my wife, by the way. I wouldn't marry any other writer in history because I'm already married. With regard to the talent question, I do not believe in a steep hierarchical curve with regard to talent and the creation of art. I do believe in genius, but I don't think that genius is born. I think it's earned. I think it's found. Speaking specifically of the novel, I think that for someone to create a novel that's genius takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. The person needs to be really well read, probably has closely studied a lot of other novels, has had an awful lot of time to write. And in this way, as with a lot of art, the novel form favors the wealthy, the people who have the time and the leisure to work on their novels over years and not just months. and who have time to do that hard work and then recover from that hard work and then do more of that hard work. Wordsworth says that poetry is strong emotion recollected in tranquility, and Van Gogh says that talent is long patience. And who has time for tranquility or patience in the modern age? The wealthy certainly have more time. However, I do wonder if more people are now able to arrange their lives in ways to give themselves more time to create the art they want by making sacrifices and living more limited lives. I think we might be living in an age where an awful lot of people are capable of creating an awful lot of really good art. And in this situation, I see that the wealthy still come out ahead because they are able to network better than people who are not wealthy. They can go to the better schools, they can parlay their private school educations into better colleges and parlay their better colleges into connections with professors who can get them into MFA programs. They can go to the conferences. And I think that the problem that we see in writing today and literature today is that too much talent is going the way of the MFA degree, and it's sequestering itself in the university system, and it's hiding itself from real life. And when we pick up the books by people of some talent and impressive talent even, we don't have great experiences because we want to bask in the glow of that talent telling us about experiences we haven't had. And we keep reading stories about people who live in university towns or people who live in New York City, where these intelligent people with this talent seem to want to congregate. And we're tired of those stories, and we need to see other people's stories, which is one of the reasons I love Substack so well. I love seeing all of the stories of so many intelligent people who've chosen not to go the MFA route, who've chosen not to live in New York City. And this matters in a world where, when pressed, the literary agents have admitted again and again that most of their new clients come to them through referrals. And so it's not a matter of taste, it's not a matter of talent. It is, like any other industry, a matter of who you know more than what you know. In this environment, artists are encouraged to start building their social media presence often even before they start working on their art, and I think that compromises their art. The art is always made with an eye toward marketability. This gets back to the question earlier about the big houses and my current thoughts on how Substack is the best platform for artists, and how if you are a novelist out there and you want to be a true novelist and a true artist, then you need to give yourself the radical permission to avoid the industry altogether. Don't go through the query process. Don't send letters. Don't go to the houses. Don't even go to the indie houses. Just publish your work. If I could create a story for a video game, what would it be? I think you're going to have to wait around and see one of my future novels. I'm working on that, actually. How much should a good teacher get paid in a world where effort was rewarded appropriately? I think that the short answer is probably $100,000 or $120,000, so maybe about double what they're currently making. But maybe the better answer is that most people don't go into education in order to get a salary. They do it for the virtue, for the reward of doing the right thing. And if you wanted to better compensate teachers, you would give them their autonomy back, and you would lower their class sizes to help them do their jobs. You would remove the onus of test prep and let them really prepare students for the real world. And I think that you would just cut out the red tape, let them teach.
Peter. So your question, I really understand it basically in two parts. I would say the first part is, what do artists who want to have their art and their identity separate, how do they handle the reality that social media and art make that more difficult, make people more likely to conflate the two. So one, I would say, yeah, I agree that that's probably true. Just even the nature of people being able to comment on a fictional short story they read. So I can read a short story you published and then make a comment that doesn't exist in, previous forms of reading fiction. You don't get to comment in a way that you think the author is going to read it. And I think, that's true on Substack. A huge author could publish fiction here, and they could know that, hey, the reader's going to get to comment. I'm going to read it. I guess they could turn that off. They can make it paid, which is a whole other thing. But yeah, so I do think it makes that line even blurrier. I think we're already going there. I mean, I think if you want to be a literary fiction writer, I think it's going to be tough. I think the way you're going to have to get around it is you're going to have to associate yourself with something else that is already has some type of identity within the marketplace. I think that's part of that thing, is that in a global flat marketplace, in a flat media landscape, it's very hard to stand out unless you're already associated with prestige and without, being part of a genre. If you're a genre writer, I think it probably matters less your personal identity. And if you're like a historical fiction writer, which is again is a genre, then I think it probably matters less and you can get away with it. But if you're a contemporary literary fiction writer, you're going to have to be associated with something that's very compelling if it's not yourself, it's going to have to be something that you're associated with that's very compelling to people. Or you're going to have to be associated with someone else very famous, like you can step into the lineage of another writer. Without that, I think it's going to be very tough. And how to do it, I was never into social media before. I never really did any social media. Substack was the first time I thought there was a social media app that worked for my needs and what I would be trying to accomplish. And the way I approach it is I just see it as very performative. I see everything I do in Substack as art, as performance. I pretty much see everyone as an artist. I don't believe necessarily anything anyone's saying at any time. It could all be art, and I would be happy with it one way or the other. The only thing that matters to me is it good art? Is it like form matching content and making something interesting out of that dynamic and telling a story and creating drama and excitement and real emotions that tap into other emotions. So I would have tried to do that with social media, with Substack. I think that's the most interesting thing about social media and writing is for writers to try to use it for our own purposes, and even using it for play and costume and escape and hiding and mystery and secrecy. I think being bold and being brave enough to use social media for play is probably the more radical way of dealing with the problem of social media flattening things and making identity so important for standing out in a crowded marketplace.
Hey, this is Emil Oddman. Emil, if you're fancy. With my early morning vocal fry, my cigarette, and my fresh coffee. 'Cause I wake up and only have 2 speeds, asleep and fuck you. My friend Craig Clevenger just got blurred because he's got The Contortionist Handbook is being re-released by Datura Books, a sub-imprint of Angry Robot, a sub-imprint of Macmillan Hatchet. I can't remember which, but that reminded me of what I consider to be the best drug dealer in story history. Dermaphoria. Meth cook. Way before Walter White was a dream in any white boy's fucking side view. He comes up with a brilliant new drug for his overlords, his power elite, the people above him. He's tired of chipping shit off matchsticks so that he can do hot cooks. And he comes up with this drug that's basically chemically a mix of LSD and MDMA, and then he does so much of his own product that he fries his brain and ends up an amnesiac, and he can only remember one name, and that is Desiree. So he's searching for Desiree the entire novel. Dermaphoria has yet to be released by Datura Books, but the handbook is coming out, and it got put in the New York Times. Why do people play so many games with each other? Men, women, children? I think it's one of our primary modes of interaction. I mean, social transaction at all levels is a game of some sort if you really think about it. Even what I'm doing right now, sitting down with my coffee and my early morning vocal fry, which is much better as soon as I wake up than any other time of the day. This is a game. Literature, self-promotion, writing. Writing is a game. It is all a game. It is an open field of play. As to why we play so many social games with each other, who knows? But I think it's shitty, and I think it's fucking up our interpersonal dynamics between men, women, people in general. I think we've gamified life to the point, thank you Silicon Valley, of it being a fucking horror show. I have this thing since I hit Substack about people who are scamming writers, and I think that they're all charlatans, and the ones that are paywalling the knowledge, because I understand paywalling some things. I understand that you got to get paid. I mean, one of my mottos is literally "fuck you, pay me." I put it on t-shirts. Well, new writers should not be these people's custies. That's the problem. These people are selling the same advice that you can get from Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird, but they're selling it behind a paywall. Or they're trying to sell you how to increase your metrics, when on a place like Substack right now, the algorithm is so simple. Interact with notes, interact with people, it rewards interaction, post, and you're going to have new followers, new subscribers, unless you're a fucking dickhole. That's just how it works. But they're out to take your money, they're out to scam you, they're out to fuck you. And they will do it relentlessly. Hell, I started doing the weekly autopsies specifically for the fact that I don't like the fact that these people are out there gatekeeping so much information. I mean, and I could gatekeep it too. I do have an editorial service, Burnt Tongue Editorial. And I do make people pay good coin for my services there. But I will never paywall the autopsies, because I believe the people who are like leading you on, they got all the pain points down, all the hooks, and then they're like, "Oh, I'll tell you more for $5.99. It's like, motherfucker, you just gave me the first rock for free and then got me hooked on crack. I used to like to listen to a lot of music. We had Grateful Dead playing. Grateful Dead, like the fucking song of the day, the album of the day, every day. Live show of the day. And that sort of annoyed me because I have, me and the Grateful Dead, we got issues. That's a whole other thing. But I used to listen to Wu-Tang Clan while I was laying acid and Bass Nectar before we found out that he was a pederast. Lots of Bass Nectar, lots of LSD laying up in that house. And this brings me to the question that I would have that I was thinking about the other day. And that is, in a marketplace that's so saturated with medias of various kinds, how do writers, authors, visual artists even, how do we compete with virtual reality or virtual realities? And I'm not talking about like that Oculus shit that you put on your head. I'm talking about the excitement of the simulation of video games, specifically video game killing. And I can tell you that I think that this is an intransitable problem. I would like to say that, first of all, this is a false dichotomy. Video games can be art. The best video games can transcend the medium and become art. But the issue here is the simulation of violence, and I think that I don't know how writing competes with that aside from writing violence better. That would be my answer. You write better violence. I eat a lot of Xanax. Anyway, speaking of Xanax, I eat a lot of Xanax. It don't heal the pain. Drugs aren't going to heal your pain. I found that out years ago with every substance known to man. I'm not prone to addiction, thankfully. That skipped a generation, but my mom is an alcoholic. I probably did so much LSD that I basically pickled myself against alcoholism. There's another story to that, but it involves science, and it's too early for me to think that hard. But drugs don't heal the pain because they're a temporary solution, and they create more problems than they fix, always. Even Xanax. When I was first prescribed a horse load of this shit, they were like, okay, Xanax is pretty cool. Now it's 15 years later, and they're like, hey, guess what? 30% of people who take this much Xanax, they're probably going to get early onset dementia. Also, you may notice that I'm angry. I'm angry all the time. Right now, I'm angry because I'm sitting drinking underneath my fucked up ceiling. But what happens to your anger when you get old? I'm wondering if I'm old now. All in all, my best friend, she started ketamine treatments for, man, I'm way over time. She started ketamine treatments for, not that we'd not already done enough ketamine in our lives, but she started ketamine treatments for treatment-resistant depression. She was a neuroscientist, pharmacologist, and I don't care what you think, prettiest woman in any room she walked into. I say this while I'm marking down my consumption and taking a little purple 1 milligram Xanax. My anger's never going to go away. I know that. Sarah died, and I became angry for the rest of my life. That's how my grief expresses itself. It expresses itself as rage. And given the political nature and stance of this country right now, I would say that I've got fuel for quite a while. Because she was a PhD and a dual PhD and a veteran drug user, she took this as an excuse to buy as much ketamine off of the street as she could. She was also a stripper. She started out at the beginning of this journey. She had enough money in her savings account for the down payment on a house in this city. Right? Talking to her later, she was down to like $5,000. By the time she died, because ketamine works on downstream opioid receptors, which is bad, because if you do a lot of ketamine, you don't end up with physical illness like you do when you get the six when you're coming off dope, right? You just have this powerful psychological urge for more fucking ketamine. By the time she took it upon herself to hang herself in her room on May 29th of 2023, she was a full-blown alcoholic, getting the DTs, had hollowed out her nasal cavity and sinuses to the point where she could stick a finger through her septum, like it was gone. She had snorted pounds of ketamine, trying to kill the pain. Drugs don't kill the pain. They don't heal the pain. The only thing that's going to heal the pain is you, yourself. What you do, your actions, how you living, where's your life at, who are you, what do you stand for, what do you believe in, what are you working on. Don't pay attention to what a person says, pay attention to the deeds that they do. Old men just start to lose their anger unless there is something there to stoke it. For me, the thing that is there to stoke it is and eternally will be my dead friend, Sarah Stilly, the hanged saint in all of my stories. Emil Ottoman on Substack, who, if you Google the first 2 pages on Google, are me until you get to furniture. That's me. Keep writing. My answer for everything is to keep writing because it is the only thing that I know how to do. Past that, this is Emil Ottoman. I'm probably already cut off by now. Good morning.
Emil, I just spent a lot of time editing your answers. You were definitely the person that was over by far the most. There were a lot of great answers that I had to cut a lot of good stuff. Your question, I have a hard time understanding. I've looked at it a bunch of times. I think the best I can interpret the question, and I think there's an element of even your question where you're being performative, I guess it's to say, why is it that in the black community, disparaging money and kind of supporting drug dealers and criminal activity, why is that, I guess, an access to a sort of an acceptance, or not at least, I don't know, pushed against? That's really the best interpretation I could give. It's a lot of people. I could definitely show the question. It's really a piece of art in itself. My answer will not give justice to the question, to the extent that there was a question, which is questionable in itself. Your type of energy, in anyone that gives a little bit of underdog energy, or I'm not too good to have done wrong energy, or I'm not scared to be neurodivergent energy, can sometimes find a welcome space in the black community. I don't think the black community is any, I mean, it's millions and millions of people, even just in America, if we're talking about America. But I could see that, having that feeling and noticing that and feeling like also like there's a lot of criticism, capitalism, because you say disparaging money, but I do think there's a lot of criticism, capitalism. I just think that makes sense because of how the modern economy evolved. There would be a lot of skepticism around, an economy built on assets and labor and, from one purview built to serve just the wealthy. So I could see why they would be skeptical of money. And I think drugs are something that's, I think, associated with entertainment and party and arts and boundary pushing. And I think bohemian artsy culture has always tends to be more genuinely accepting of others. And that, I just think a lot of musicians that were making money doing drugs, and I think, and obviously drugs had a terrible impact on the black community.
What up, it's Magnetic S. The S is for soldier or savior or son, because I'm the God's son. Shout out my brother Andrew for, having me today. So, when it comes to, we're talking about this fly shit. I feel like the flyest person in the history of flyness outside of me, obviously, I would really have to give that to, it's two people that I have to mention. And those two people are, for one, my father, just because if I'm the flyest in the history of flyness, and I'm choosing who's the flyest outside of me, obviously got to be the one that told me how to get fly, right? So, got to get out to my pops, you get what I'm saying? And I also just feel like my pops in his little corner of the world or whatever, he don't really get enough credit or as much credit as he should for, his stylistic talents, you get what I'm saying? And there's a lot of people right now that are currently recognized for the way they dress, you get what I mean? That were influenced by my pops. And not in no fashion way, just by, pure natural aura and swag. So I got to give that to my pops firstly, as, you know what I'm saying? Because that's just who taught me how to do this shit. And then my girl, definitely, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to give a guy and a girl, obviously. I have to give it to my girl because she's one of the flyest people I ever met in my life, if I'm being honest. So, yeah, those are definitely the two people I say if I had to answer that question. I split that in half between the two of them. They both might fuck me up, so gotta give it to the both of them. If I had to choose any writer in history to write the introduction to my final novel, it would definitely be Amiri Baraka. I'm glad I was able to choose Dead or Alive, to be honest, because this is like one of the only writers that I've probably read in my life. And there's a few writers that really inspired me, but this is one of the only ones I've ever read that I could genuinely say I resonate with in a certain type of way. I'm not even very familiar with his work, honestly. Like, I just found out about him recently, maybe a few months ago, maybe like 3 months ago or so. And now maybe more than that, like 3 to 5 months ago. But I've been reading his autobiography. That's the first piece that I started reading of his. And just like his cadence, his tone, his voice, it really reminds me of myself. At first I was a little weary of his work because I thought he might be a little bit too intellectual for like what I was just in the mood to read. But he actually writes just like me, breaks all of the rules of grammar while still being very articulate and using, very high level vocabulary weaved in there, but a lot of music references, culture references, talking shit. You get what I'm saying? He writes as if he's writing like a fucking angry email to one of his homies or to his girl or some shit like that. And I fuck with that. So, like, super heavy. I plan for all my writing to kind of come across that way. He's actually inspired me to not give a fuck at all about like any of that, what is supposed to be proper academic writing or whatever, literary, prowess, whatever that shit is. He actually has inspired me to not care about that because I can tell he probably didn't really care. And this is autobiography, so he wrote this towards the end of his career, so I don't really know if his earlier work is this carefree. I hope it is. I'm excited to read it, but nonetheless, if that's who I had to choose to represent me and to introduce me and, my shit, it would be him because, he definitely a hood nigga at heart, as academic as he is. And of course he went to the capstone, to the big HU, so gotta respect that. And shout out Jersey too. The future of art, I really see that going in a positive direction in some ways. It's like weird because we're like in this place where, because of like technology and shit like that, it's like bittersweet because it's given a lot of independent artists such as myself and people that I am around and I spend my time with, these platforms that we can own, that we can actually run ourselves, or we don't need anybody to invest in us, any suits, quote unquote, or anybody with any ill intentions, as most artists in history have had to deal with. We now don't really have to. But at the same time, the suits that own these platforms that are giving us our voices, we still have to deal with them in some capacity. So it's like we still have to deal with their policies, with their behind the scenes tactics that they're doing with their algorithms and all of these different things. You get what I'm saying? Where, they have to play a very sneaky game so that they can still get their bottom line. So it's a little bit difficult, but the integrity and the purity of art, and that's in the hearts of a lot of the independent artists and artists that are coming up, that's kind of carrying the torch right now into the future, I trust a little bit more than what we've been seeing recently. I feel like we're getting a lot of that old essence back, you know what I'm saying, of what really built this shit and gave it its, name and its meaning, and every sense of it, from music to whatever, So I like where it's going, and I trust that people like me and the people that I'm around, that we gonna be the ones that's really, setting the tone of what art is supposed to be like in the future. So it's interesting to think about the idea of like when niggas will work together to get this money, because I don't think we are ever going to work together to get this money. I don't even think that that's possible. And not that I don't think we're capable of getting money or capable of working together. I don't think we're capable of doing both of those things at the same time. Niggas, and when I say niggas, I mean black people, right? Obviously. Niggas are not inherently, like, niggas don't inherently thrive in this economic system that we currently live in. Niggas are not made to thrive in that. And the system is not made for niggas to thrive in it. So it's not possible. Like, of course, there's going to be pockets of niggas that work together and get money. But collectively, as a community, all of us working together to get money is not going to happen, because that's just not our nature. Our nature is to work together and create. Our nature is to work together and build community. Our nature is to work together and love one another, and a lot of different things that we are showing that we can do, but money is getting in the way of that. And us collectively getting money is not going to happen. We collectively get together and go to war. We collectively get together and do a lot of shit. But collectively getting together to get money, like, and that's the flaw, and that's the reason why we've never been able to get together and do much of shit in all this time, because the goal has been to get together to get money. But getting together to get money in this system is not the way to beat the system, because money is not made for people to get together to get. Like, that's the whole idea of money, is to separate and divide. And it's damn sure meant to separate and divide us, who are not inherently money people. We are love people. You know what I'm saying? That's our nature, is love and care for our brother, not money. Money is like literally predicated on deceit and lies. That's not our nature. And greed, which is also not our nature. It's something we've adapted. It's something we good at, because we could do everything. Everything came from us in the first place. So of course we could be greedy if we want to. Of course we could lie if we want to. You know what I'm saying? But because it's not our nature, we can't do it at a certain level in unison with the entire community for us all to do it in mass. Like, that's just not ever going to happen. My favorite fashion designer doesn't really exist, because I don't really have a favorite designer. But my favorite type of fashion, or just type of wears in general, I really like Japanese fashion. I have for a while, really. And the reason why is because I think that Japanese fashion has like a lot of inspiration style-wise that comes from martial arts and tribalism. And the way the clothes are designed, it really encompasses that. It's very high quality and very masculine, which I like. And there's also a lot of inspiration of hip-hop culture in certain brands that are like modern, which I fuck with too, of course. You get what I'm saying? So Japanese fashion is probably like really the closest to like a ethnic, truly like cultural type of fashion. You get what I'm saying? That is like built in like, masculinity and like community and shit like that. You get what I'm saying? I'm not trying to get all deep with it, because I don't think like that when I get dressed, but I can tell that's why I gravitate to it. So that's like my favorite type of shit to wear. Japanese denim, all that shit. It's all quality shit, but it fits me very well. The cuts, the silhouettes all fit me very well. It's never too tight or too, you know what I'm saying, crazy looking, but it's also never super baggy neither. It's still very smooth, which is my style type shit. Where would the world be without God? I mean, the funny thing is, that's an ironic and weird question, because it's like, we wouldn't even have a world to talk about right now if it wasn't for God. Like, God is talking right now. You get what I'm saying? Like, I'm not talking. I'm nothing. I'm just a collection of skin and atoms and bone marrow and shit like that. You get what I'm saying? But the entity that's actually speaking and saying words and thoughts right now is God. So it wouldn't be no world without God. I don't want to imagine a world that don't got God in it. That's not a world I would ever want to live in. So, yeah, I don't know where the world would be. It wouldn't be one. Shout out to God. Facts. Shout out to me. Alright, shout out to Andrew. And there's one thing you said that I'm gonna address real quick. I'm happy I got a little extra time. Because you said some funny shit. You was like how, we might be the two realest niggas doing a podcast, but maybe not, because it's Kingpins doing podcasts. That's the funniest shit. Because when I be watching Kingpins do podcasts, I be like, yo, you used to be a murderer. Like, now you sitting up arguing with niggas on YouTube. Like, damn. Life comes at you fast, man. I mean, but at the same time, it's like kind of a bittersweet thing, because I'm happy that they like doing something like, that's a little more positive, I guess, than whatever they was doing. I got them locked up and shit like that. So, I don't know, man. It is what it is. I'm happy to be top 2 reels on Substack, though, but I'd also support Kingpins doing podcasts as well. As long as you ain't rat, you got my support. Facts.
So the way that I handle being an artist in a suit, how do I deal with that duality? That's a deep question. I think earlier, coming out of college and graduate school, I never would have seen myself as a suit. I never would have seen myself as, I definitely saw myself as someone who was only focused on art, who was only focused on writing, and was very dedicated to the craft and the idea of purely pursuing art. And I would say that was, 22 to like 26, 27, maybe even 28. And that was very much how I identify myself. I didn't come from like an economically impoverished environment. Like both of my parents are lawyers. My dad's a very successful businessman and lawyer. My mother's a very successful lawyer and judge. And I'm also from a small town, so I was, even more my skew from the small town I'm from with these very successful black parents in this like 50% black town was that, I felt well off. Now, I probably was middle class. I kind of had the pretensions of an artist of not having to care about money. Now, I guess I graduated from grad school. Eventually, the Great Recession happens in 2010 as I'm coming into the market. And, the reality of being an adult and having to take care of myself and also wanting to be free meant that I had to do something entrepreneurial. And it was my father who was walking me in front of a courthouse, and I'll never forget it. And he told me, hey, I think you should do real estate because eventually you can get to $5 million and you can get $50,000 making $5 million in assets. And, the way I reconcile that is partly how I came up to rap fiction. I think at a certain point I was doing that. I mean, I did that, real estate, and I was always making movies. And I have a bunch of movies that I've made that I'm going to start to promote and sell on Substack. It's the link so that people can buy them on Apple, not in Amazon or whatever. So, but yeah, I was doing real estate since from 27 to now. So, and I think a part of that is definitely coming to see the importance of commerce and art and understanding it's important to understand commerce and its relationship to art and how art is an asset class. And I think my approach to Substack is very much based in that understanding. I haven't even gotten close to answering this question, but I think the answer is, I have to make sure I answer. I think the answer is the business became part of the art became part of the business. The suit became another performance. Now, I don't think I think I perform it well and I take it seriously, but I also understand that I'm performing leadership in a real estate context to help improve my team and my partner's ability to compete. And in art, I'm pretty much doing the same thing. So, it's kind of like the rapper kind of Jay-Z, the drug dealer rapper phenomena helped me see how I was a version of the same thing and how a lot of people are living their life as artists. I think some of the best people are not necessarily creating art, but they're living their life as an art project about love or about uniqueness, about bravery, about courage, whatever they're trying to put out there with the art project of their life. I think there's people who are not even making art, but are art, and they're living their life as art. So, that being said, I want to create art and sell art and make money off it. And I want to see other people do the same.
I'm running out of time. I think one of the thing really, that makes me feel hopeful is knowing that there's a power greater than us. Whether people choose to believe in it or not, it's not even important. It's just the fact that there's stars up there. At least from my vantage point, there's stars, and there's a sun up there, and there's some other planets up there. And we didn't have anything to do with that. We can't control anything that's going on with the wind, the rain, none of that. So that's a power that's greater than us. And there's a lot of hope in that. There's a lot of trust and faith in that. Knowing that there's a higher being, a supreme being, an all knowing being that's sovereign and omnipotent, that is going to make sure that when it's all said and done, everything falls in place like it's supposed to, no matter how chaotic it can look at the moment. That's one of the things that makes me hopeful. Another thing that makes me hopeful, love makes me hopeful. Love is getting a bad rap out here in this society today, but I still believe in love with everything in me. So I think love is the plug. So definitely those two things, God and love, which honestly, if you know what you're talking about, and if you know, they're synonymous with each other. Let's see, a warm memory, man. Wow, about my childhood. One of the warmest memories of my childhood off the top of my head, because there's plenty, was when I was 8 years old and I had to get an appendectomy. And it was an emergency appendectomy because my appendix had actually ruptured. And they had to get me into surgery immediately to remove it before it caused any other kinds of complications. And I just remember my father, you know, looking, looking over me, looking at me while I was in, the stretcher or gurney or whatever, and they was getting ready to wheel me into surgery. And he was crying, and he tried to fool me and tell me that he wasn't. And I remember my mom saying, he was, I'm thinking that he's supposed to be, consoling me and telling me it's going to be all right. And I'm the one in the waiting room trying to console him, So that was something that is warm to me because, you know, that's my daddy, you know. And my mom, I just have a lot of warm memories. I remember one time I caught them trying to get the toys out of the back of the car, to try to pretend that Santa Claus gave them to me. They never knew that I saw them getting the toys out of the trunk. They didn't know, and that's a warm memory to me. So I just woke up the next day and was like, "Look at what Santa Claus brought me," but I saw them do it. So that's a couple of things. I think one of the things that the Black American family um, can teach the larger American family is about resilience. How we work really hard to stay together no matter what kind of obstacles comes up against us. Um, how we go toe to toe with each other a lot of times and don't really have the best relationships. But one thing is for sure, if something go down, we're going to show up for each other. And I think that that says a lot about us understanding that we are all we got. So while I might not talk to you every day because you get on my nerves as one of my family members, can't nobody mess with you. Can't nobody mess with you. Can't nobody say nothing crazy to you. If you need me, I'm showing up. I'm pulling up without a problem. And we're going to handle this issue that you got because we're blood. So I think that's one thing that the Black American family can teach the larger American family is about that resilience and that sticking together. Um, yeah, and just how to survive despite what's going on. Because I really think that with the way the world is looking right now, um, shit, we gonna be alright. If there's anybody, when it comes to what's happening right now, what's going on right now, this whirlwind that we're caught up in, if there's any group of people that's gonna be okay, it's us, cause we just know how to survive. So yeah, that's what I think the Black American family can teach the larger American family. The American education system needs culturally relevant education. I am an educator. I walk into a classroom every single day and look at beautiful children that look exactly like me. And I have to teach them about stuff that they don't want to learn about, and I don't want to teach them because it has nothing to do with them essentially. I think that one of the most important things is that children should be able to see themselves in their education. And that's not happening on any kind of level that I'm comfortable with. And to be honest, despite what's going on with book bans and all of these other the ridiculousness with CRT, you know what I'm saying, critical race theory, which is not even being taught in K through 12, with all that foolishness that they've been hyping up to mean something, and it don't mean nothing. At the end of the day, our children need to see themselves in what they're learning. They need to understand that they come from a place that this is not the original place that they come from. And mind you, I want it mixed in with everything else, but I definitely want to make sure that children see themselves. Another thing, see, this is something that I'll be here all day on. Another thing that the American educational system needs is decentering testing. It's too much emphasis on testing and this pursuit of data, because none of that is a real measure of our children's intelligence. And I'll leave it there because I'll be there all day. So, a good apology is when it's sincere, real simple. When it's sincere, when it's thoughtful, when the person knows exactly what they did that the other person took offense to. So there's some compassion, some empathy there in the apology. And there is a promise, a vow that it won't happen again. My favorite thing about growing up in Columbus, Mississippi was how well taken care of it was. Like, I was insulated from a lot of the things that people think you deal with when you grow up in Mississippi, because they've watched Ghosts of Mississippi and Mississippi Burning. They think that you're stepping out sidewalks to let white people walk by, and that you're dealing with some sort of serious racial issue every day. And no, I was cocooned within black neighborhoods and black families. Like, everybody in the neighborhood took care of me and made sure that I was okay. So I was insulated away from all of that, and it was not something that I had to think about on any kind of regular basis. I had a very normal and regular childhood. I rode my bike around the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Those are the kind of things that I did because everybody took care of each other. Yeah. So, Chandra Kamaria. Chandra is my real first name. Kamaria, that's something that came to me. Um, it's a pseudonym. Um, it's not part of my real government name, not my real middle name, last name. I've always liked pseudonyms. I've always liked the idea of having a creative persona that had a different name you know, from what an artist is, born to. I I am Joseph and Willie Pearl's daughter. Um, yeah, I was born in a small town in Mississippi, Macon, and I was raised in a larger small town called Columbus. So I write, you know what I'm saying? And I read a lot and I think a lot. I laugh a lot. I observe the world a lot. So,
Sandra, you never answered the question about the movie. You didn't get back to it. So I'm going to have to answer that one for you. So for me, I'm going to say my favorite black comedy is Life with Martin Lawrence and Eddie Murphy. They're two wrongly convicted Harlem. I think one of them is a huckster, sort of bootlegger, and the other one, I think, is a businessman or works in corporate or something. Anyways, they get caught up in a bootlegging scam down south, and they end up getting falsely accused of murder, I think, and they end up spending basically their whole life in this southern, really terrible prison, and we kind of learn the decades of history that passed through the prism of them being in this prison in a comedy. And I just find that comedy to be super funny. I guess I could have gone with something like esoteric or super original, but I'm just going to keep it real. I would have to go with life. I mean, I guess you could go with Coming to America. I think it's hard to beat that from a virtuoso with Eddie Murphy, but the sharing of the stage, the back and forth between those two comedians, that chemistry was just amazing. And I think their children are engaged or dating or something. So I think that speaks to the fact that those two entities did really have good chemistry. You know, in a better Hollywood, I think they go on to do like 2 or 3 at least films together after that. They were so funny together. And I thought that, you know, that combo could have really had a great run, I think. Anyway, so I'm gonna go with life for that one. What do I love most about being a black man? There's so many things to love. I mean, I think on a personal level, I think I love the feeling of connectivity that you can get in certain spaces as a black man. You can access a certain feeling of deep connectedness and this home within a home feeling that can provide some metaphorical relief from the inevitable existential dread that comes with all aspects of life.
Hi, this is Zanny D. If you had to give Substack 5 ducks, what would they be and why? So to answer this question, you have to know that I'm 5 ducks in a trench coat. That would be the reference. You'll have to go to my Substack to learn more from there. But the first duck would be bravery. Bravery outside of writing. We, as writers, are so willing to put so much of ourselves into our writing, but we are terrified, absolutely terrified of giving ourselves to other people outside of our writing. And that's just so sad. The second duck would be humility. Good Lord, writers have a difficult time with humility. And I think that's because to be a writer, you have to have confidence. Even if you don't have it, you have to fake it because you're putting your soul and your mind and your heart on your sleeve all at the same time and hoping someone witnesses you. And that's hard. But with that confidence has come this air of better than others. And we need to shed that. The third duck would be compassion. Compassion over empathy. I'll have a rant about this at some point, but we don't need to understand people to feel compassion for them. We don't need to believe people to understand that they're suffering. So I would love to see more compassion on Substack. The other 2 ducks are going to be 4 and 5 because that's the only way we're going to keep bravery and compassion and humility in line. What is the connection between art and suffering? Perspective. It's all about perspective. When you have experienced suffering, especially deep suffering, it gives you a different perspective on joy and happiness and light and laughter and all of the things that matter. I think rich people have this habit of, privileged people have this habit of creating drama in their lives because it's so easy for them to function that they don't have the perspective and the opposite emotions to be able to feel the good things the way that those of us who have experienced suffering have. So suffering is a vital part of the human experience, no matter how difficult it is. What movie most reminds you of your life and why? Unless there's a movie about an online community of nihilists buying an RV for a woman escaping an abusive marriage with her children, I think we aren't quite at the technological state yet where we've absorbed those kind of plot lines into mainstream Hollywood media. But what I will go with is Big Fish, if it were directed by Taika Waititi, because no one is going to believe it when it's over. And that's okay. I don't need them to. The people who are here to witness me know the truth. And I think movies are just about as much about lies as they are about truths. Question 4. Please recall your most joyful moment in life. Any moment when I've been able to experience music with other people in a setting where everyone supports each other, no matter what the talent is, has been the most joyful moment in my life. But when I was a child, there was a rock in the forest, and the sun always shined on it. And that was my safe space for a very difficult childhood. And whenever I think of joy, I think of Sunrock. What skill do you wish you could improve in yourself as a writer? As a new writer, this is a difficult question. I'm going to cop out and say productivity, dedication. I lack these things. I lack a sense of self. So angles like wanting to produce something to curate an audience or a reaction aren't things that resonate with me personally, and they should. They don't. So what I'd really like to improve on is dedicating myself to the craft and taking it more seriously from the angle of I have an audience, and that audience cares. They've witnessed me and they care. And I feel like I need to respect that. And I need to hold that sacred and return that energy by putting out the work that people are waiting for. How would you define luxury? Again, I think this all falls down to perspective. I think luxury is the feeling of having things that seem outside our means. You know, luxury for someone who's just exiting the prison industrial complex could be a burger at McDonald's. Luxury for my son is being able to sleep in a queen size bed. Luxury is so catered to, you know, these divine items that feel inaccessible to those of us who are, you know, below the upper echelon. But luxury is really just about having more than what we need and more than what we desire. And I think if we could look at luxury more in that perspective, we would find more luxury in each other. What is needed to create a healthy community? So I saved a lot of my time for this last question because I think it's probably the most important question on here. A lot of folks, I think, have preconceived notions about what they want a community to be, and that often ends up looking like an echo chamber. And echo chambers are great. I have my echo chamber on Facebook, and it is the world to me. It is my safety net. It is how I've survived the past 5 years of my life. I would not be alive right now without my echo chamber. But communities are something different. Communities have a common shared goal. And that's why unintentional communities pop up in things like neighborhoods, where you can have people of completely opposing political views, but are all there to protect the integrity of their neighborhood. So I think the problem that we're having with communities right now is we're trying so hard to make sure our communities are centered around people who all get along. And that's not a community. Communities don't exist without conflict, because through conflict, we grow, we expand our minds, we understand discourse better, we understand alternative perspectives better. We need conflict as human beings to be able to curate a existence with meaning. So to completely erase the idea that we can't live next to people that we don't agree with is dangerous to us. And I'm not speaking of, pardon the USian reference, but Trumpian politics. I'm not talking about people who dehumanize each other. That's bigotry, and bigotry has no place in communities. But when it comes down to disagreements like libertarianism versus leftism versus liberalism, there is space there for communities to come to common shared agreements where even if ideologies don't necessarily mix and they still clash, the basic humanitarian efforts are still present. And that is what we need to be striving for in communities, is what is your shared common goal? What are you all striving for and meeting together for? And connect over that. Connect over that first before the conflicts arise, as they always will. Because once you have a shared connection over something that is meaningful to each other, you bring that connectedness to the discourse, and you're able to conduct yourself with more compassion. You're able to see each other's suffering. You're able to find joy in each other where you wouldn't normally find yourself finding joy. So as writers, I think the future of writing is dead. No, publishing is dead. Writers will always go on, but we need communities. We need to stop isolating ourselves, and that will be hard considering how much competition we're in with each other from any given day. But we can exist in competition with each other. We can exist in conflict with each other as long as we are not denying each other the basic foundation of our humanity.
All right. So what was the inspiration and the story behind Monster Truck, the story behind the story Monster Truck, and what did I think about being involved in some flux, and also what is rap fiction? So, and what is my goal with rap fiction? So my goal with rap fiction is to have a lot of readers. I would like to have as many readers as the fans that exist of hip hop. And so, yeah, just to take advantage of the huge fan base that rap has and get them to read my fiction and ideally other people's fiction, and to help keep fiction reading and American fiction innovative and at the top of the literary, fight for cultural relevant artifacts, to keep the literary novel, to keep it relevant, to connect it to rap, which is something that's constantly thinking about innovation and using a lot of the techniques and tricks and hustles from rap, and that in rap's tricks and hustles go back into like West Africa and very deep into like lots of interesting thinking of power and subverting power and leading and having power. And I think all those things exist in rap, and then this art form that helped evolve to become rap. And I think connecting that with the fiction novel, specifically really the American fiction novel and the American fiction tradition, combining them and thinking about them as a similar thing is an opportunity to get, people who don't typically read to read, and also a way to create economic opportunities specifically for, Black male and female writers, even though I imagine rap fiction could be done by anybody. But specifically a lot of Black people are going to understand really the intricacies of how to bridge the two. And so I think creating more writers, create more readers for those writers, creating more readers in general, and innovating is something that I think I would like to accomplish with rap fiction. And I have 3 rap fiction albums in mind. The first one is Everything But the Fiction. The second one is Nothing But the Fiction Side A. And then the third one is Nothing But the Fiction Side B. All right, and then Some Flux and Monster Truck. So Some Flux was all Sandalore Sykes, who is interviewed in this same 7-question pilot episode. Her and Brock Eldon worked together on that. They made Some Flux, I think, based off Sandy's story, really. Hello, 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 which kind of got into the parking lot thing. I read that story, and then the other story that was connected to that story, I heard a lot about them as they were both talking about. I was talking to them about them as they were coming up with Some Flux. I did not anticipate being in Some Flux. For some reason, the idea of a monster truck kind of got stuck in my head, like a monster truck being in a parking lot. That got stuck in my head around Christmas, early in December, and then I thought about the Nas song, I Gave You Spectacle, because I wanted to do the POV of the truck. And then that kind of led me to just pour a bunch of emotions into that story. And I kind of showed some more of my writing style actually in my manuscript. And I also did this Substack Universe thing where I put a bunch of notes in there for the writers, for the Some Flux. I don't even think they cared or got it or anything. So I don't know. Whatever. This is way too long. Backatcha.